Thinking about wrapping your car? Today in the garage, I'll break down what you need to know before deciding if vinyl is right for you while we wrap the roof on the 3rd Gen 4Runner. So here we are at the roof of the 4Runner. It's actually the last piece I have left on this wrap. When I bought the car, it had some cosmetic issues. The paint was 25 years old, and it's been sitting in the Texas sun for the last quarter century. On top of that, at some point the car had been in a minor accident. It looked like the bumper and the passenger side fender had dents, and a few of the trim pieces had been bent back into place. None of that was too concerning to me, because I planned on using this truck as my daily. But since I have other vehicles, I decided to take some time and go ahead and break this one down, put it back together the way I'd like. So I replaced the bumper, pulled the dented panels off, along with all the fender flares, and while I had them off, I decided it would be a good idea to do something about the paint. Now the vinyl I'm using here I actually bought for a different project altogether, but since I had the roll, I decided I wanted to wrap this one. I figured I might as well use what I had. The color we have here today is Gloss Sandstorm from Cheetah Wrap. Previously, Cheetah Wrap was kind of known for selling factory seconds and end runs of 3M's 1080 line, but it looks like in recent years they've started either private labeling or producing their own vinyl. And I wouldn't say it's the easiest vinyl to work with or the most conformable, but at the time of filming, you can pick up a roll of this from $550 from Cheetah Wrap directly. A roll is 60 inches wide and 75 feet long, so this should give you enough material for a 4Runner and a half, and that made it pretty attractive for me. Now it may be a little hard to tell in the video, but if you zoom in, you'll notice the sides of the wrap go up just past the ridge in the roof line. And what you see me doing now is just putting down a product called knifeless tape. This will allow me to apply a vinyl over the tape and overlap the sides, and then pull the tape through the vinyl to cut a line that matches the contour of the roof. At the beginning of the video, you probably saw there was alcohol drying on the roof after having been wiped down previously. Here I'm going to wipe it down again. And you'll find when you're wrapping, the most important thing is to keep the surface clean. I'm taking extra care specifically around the molding for the windshield. Any place you have a rubber molding, you tend to attract debris and dirt that build up under the rubber. In this instance, the previous owner actually went and siliconed the rubber molding down, which means I have less dirt to worry about, but it does pose a different problem, in that now I can't tuck the vinyl underneath the molding. I'll have to trim right along the edge. It's not an ideal solution, but again, for a daily driver, I'm not going to go through the effort of picking out all the silicone. And since I'm not able to tuck the vinyl here, it also means I'm going to have to use a knife on the body of the vehicle. Not an ideal situation, but as long as you angle the blade into the gap between the rubber and the metal, you should avoid cutting into the paint. And I'm going to make sure we're not wasting any vinyl needlessly, so I'm going to double check the measurements here and verify the piece that I cut has enough overlap to cover all the edges and run on to the next panel. For large pieces, it's nice to have an extra set of hands. Today in the shop, I'm on my own though. Here I've got it rolled up so it's kind of staying by itself, and I'm just going to pull the edge free. After attempting this a couple of times, I gave up and decided to just start from the front and unroll it backwards as I went. There are several vinyl manufacturers that utilize a cap sheet. Cheetah Wrap seems to be the stiffest cap sheet I've ever had to deal with in a vinyl. That's not necessarily a bad thing, just something to be aware of. It does make the vinyl behave a little more differently than I'm used to, but it also probably allows you to abuse it quite a bit without actually damaging anything. And now that the vinyl is rolled out, we're just going to utilize a couple of magnets to hold it in rough place while we check all the edges to ensure that we have overlap onto all the other panels. You won't be able to see what I'm doing up close, but I'm adding a couple more magnets here, and then I'm checking the overlaps. I'm going to grab a pair of scissors and trim the excess vinyl off. Not having enough vinyl on your panel is the absolute worst situation, but only slightly less bad is having too much. Ideally, you want a few extra inches to give you some room to move the slack into that's not on the panel you're attempting to wrap, but not so much excess that the material is unwieldy. It's slightly out of frame, but I'm just pulling the top layer of the vinyl off. This is a protective coating that they put on there. On flat panels, there may actually be some benefit to applying it with the cap sheet on to prevent scratches from your squeegee, but this particular cap sheet is so thick that even in the most modest contour, it's worth peeling it off beforehand. And this is another reason why it's good to have some excess vinyl outside of the panel you're working on, because you can use that to start the peel with a knife without risking damaging any of the vinyl that actually has to live on the panel. And since I've got the 4 magnets at the back, they're actually holding the vinyl in place so I can reposition these magnets up front after I get the cap sheet off the vinyl. And just like we saw in the front, one by one I'm going to remove the magnet and then replace it once the cap sheet is past that spot. And with the cap sheet removed, we can get that out of our way and trash it. And here I'm just checking the film itself to see how far over I'm going. Cheetah Wrap and most vinyl films actually come in a 60-inch roll. Here the roof is actually only about 50 inches, which left me a few inches on either end that I could trim off. And I'm just using a pair of scissors to do that. And when you're trimming, you want to trim off as large a contiguous piece as you can get away with. It is an excellent idea to save these pieces to do ancillary things like door handles and mirrors. And now that the sides of the panel are all trimmed up, what I'm going to do is fold this edge over and peel the backing paper and then tuck it underneath. And once it's tucked under, I'm putting a crease in the backing paper so that it won't have a tendency to unroll itself. And that leaves me with a little bit of vinyl that has the adhesive exposed so I can attach it to the edge of the hatch. And by just lightly squeezing that edge, it'll hold it in place for me so that I can start peeling the backing paper and the vinyl won't shift around. Now that the vinyl is down, I'm confident enough to remove the magnets here, and I'm actually just repositioning them to an area where the vinyl has already been adhered, just to give it a little extra security so that when I pull this backing paper, nothing shifts. Normally I wouldn't do this, but so you can see how this works, I'm folding the vinyl back and rolling the backing paper and pulling it forward. And this is part of the reason why cleaning is such an important step. The adhesive of the vinyl is actually touching the roof right now, so if there's any dust, contamination, dirt, or debris, the adhesive will be stuck to that. And when we squeegee it down, that will show through in the vinyl. And that brings us to a few things to think about before you jump into car wrap. First, paint condition matters. Vinyl wrap has become something of a misnomer for a paint job, but wrap doesn't fix bad paint. If your clear coat is flaking or you've got chips or rust, the wrap may not stick to it, or worse, when it comes time to remove it, it can do extra damage and make your problem much worse. But just as important, the wrap doesn't hide the defects in the body. If you have deep gouges, chips, or a rough paint surface texture, the wrap will actually fill in those contours, and those same chips, rough texture, and dents will show through the wrap. Fixing bad paint or bodywork can be many times more expensive than the wrap itself. Which brings us to our next point. How are you going to use your car? Is it a daily driver, or is it just your weekend toy? If your car lives outside, it's going to take a lot more abuse, and wraps on daily drivers tend to wear out a lot faster. That's not to say it can't be a good option for a daily driver. If your paint's immaculate condition and you're just trying to preserve that paint, a wrap is a good option to help you do that. Also, if you're just not quite sure what the look is going to be, you can go for a wrap. It's a good way to try it out, and you can experiment with different liveries or color schemes, and if you don't like it, typically all it takes is a little more vinyl to change it up. 3. Are you going to attempt to DIY this, or are you going to hire an installer? Typically, I would say, unless you've done this before, pay a professional. Bad installs mean bubbles, lifting edges, and early failure. But that being said, the 4Runner is probably one of the friendliest body styles for a wrap. Outside the fender flares and the cladding on the side, every other panel on the 4Runner is relatively flat. The sheet metal doesn't have any deep contours, the door handles and mirrors aren't very obtrusive, and the window moldings all peel away pretty easily to give you access. And even those fender flares that would be more challenging typically come in colors that lend itself to being a good accent for a lot of the colors you would normally wrap your car. I mentioned the DIY route because a full wrap can cost you anywhere between $2,000 and $6,000 depending on the material and the installer. But depending on what tools you already have, and if you've got the patience to prep the car and work the vinyl, you might be able to get away with it for as little as $550. And finally, and probably the most important in determining if wrap is right for you, is knowing what your goals are. Are you doing this for a look, branding for your team or business, just protecting the paint? Knowing your goal helps you pick the right material and finish, and makes sure you have a realistic timeline on the life of your wrap. For me, it's all about the look. This will be my new daily driver, so I wasn't going to spend thousands of dollars getting it repainted and removing dents and scratches. There's a lot of spots in the paint where it started to oxidize and the surface texture is rough. And most importantly, I already had the vinyl sitting around. It made a lot of sense to spend a day or two cleaning, sanding, and polishing in order to refresh the look of the car, being that it's Texas in 3 or 4 years I'll likely need to do it again, but for the price, and since I'm doing it myself, it's pretty hard to beat. So if you're still here and still interested in doing a wrap, I'm going to give you a few ways of making it last as long as possible. 1. Hand wash only. No automated car washes. Use the 2-bucket method with the soft microfiber mitt to avoid scratching your wrap. 2. Minimize UV exposure. Park in the shade or use a car cover when possible. Sun is the #1 killer of vinyl wraps here in Texas. At the shop, we only warranty horizontal surfaces like your hood and your roof for 1 year. And if you read the spec sheet from most vinyl manufacturers, they do the same. 3. Use pH balance cleaners. Many of those low pH car washes you find on the shelf will strip the plasticizer from the wrap and cause it to start cracking prematurely. 4. Avoid pressure washing. If you must use a pressure washer, keep it on a low pressure and stay at least 12 inches away, especially near the edges. Work from the center of a panel out, never from the edge in. 5. Consider ceramic coating. There's a lot of inexpensive ceramic coats out there now, and you can add it to the wrap to give it some extra UV protection, and it'll make cleaning much easier. 6. Keep it clean. Bird droppings, sap, bug splatter, they'll all stain your wrap just like they do paint. Clean them off as soon as possible. Light colored wraps are particularly susceptible to this. 7. Protect those high wear areas. Door sills, handles, trunk edges, they all take a beating. Use PPF, an edge seal tape, or an extra layer of vinyl wrap to protect these zones. 8. Don't let the damage sit. A lifted edge or a bubble will only get worse. It never gets better. Address these issues early before they spread. If you've gone with an installer, your wrap will have come with a warranty. Make sure you use it before it becomes a problem. 9. Skip the wax with fillers. Most old school and cheaper waxes use petroleum and harsh solvents, and they can discolor your wrap. Use a specific wrap detailer instead. And keep in mind most light scratches in your wrap will self-heal when they get in the sun, so a wax filler really isn't necessary. And finally, know when it's time to remove. Most wraps last 3 to 5 years, and on some horizontal surfaces or places like Texas and Arizona, it may be a lot less than that. Be on the lookout for cracks forming in the vinyl or color itself becoming hazy and dull. Once this starts to happen, the vinyl will progressively get harder to remove and it could damage the paint if you leave it on for too long. Removing at the appropriate time allows you to replace it without an expensive repair. So at this point in the video, the panel is pretty much on. Now, the video is obviously sped up, but the roof itself took nearly half an hour. With the vinyl applied, I can pull up that knifeless tape and then come back with a knife for the windshield and the rear hatch. If you're attempting this yourself, take care on this step. A miscut edge can ruin an otherwise perfect panel. Make sure you're in a comfortable, stable position, and whenever possible, complete the cut in one continuous motion. Cut along the edges and in the gaps, never on the paint surface when avoidable. It may take some time to develop a feel for how to hold the knife for smooth cuts, and finding the correct pressure to push down with. Use a scrap piece in the panel gap to practice beforehand. So is a wrap right for you? If you're looking for style, short-term protection, or just a way to stand out, it can be a great option, but only if you take care of it. If you've made it this far, thanks for sticking around. If this video helped you out, consider giving it a like and subscribe. Got questions or your own tips? Leave them down in the comments below. And I'll see you guys next time in the garage.